They say it takes a village to raise a child. That is true, but sometimes when the child is not entirely of this world, the village is made of ancient trees and black rivers and wolves who carry prophecy in their bones. Sometimes the nursery is a forest floor carpeted with pine needles and moonlight. Sometimes the lullaby is a hoe that climbs the mountains and shakes the stars loose from the sky. This is the story of how the sacred child grew, not in spite of the wild, but because of it, because of them, because of what they gave him that no human hand ever could. The knowledge of exactly who and what he was, from the very first breath to the very last star of every winter night. Spring came to Wolf Park the way it always does. Slowly at first, then all at once, the frost retreating, the black river running faster and cleaner, the silver-backed trees putting out their first pale green, and the dense Serafine had chosen a deep shelter beneath the roots of the oldest oak on the high bridge, packed with dry leaves and wolf warmth. The child grew. He was small, impossibly small for something that contained so much, but Seraphine was patient the way only ancient things are patient, without effort, without calculation, with the simple, unhurried certainty that everything that needed to happen would happen in exactly the time it needed. She cleaned him, she warmed him, she lay great grey head beside his and breathed slowly so he could feel the rhythm and match it. His first teacher was her heartbeat. His first step came on a warm afternoon in the heart of spring. Seraphine watched him pull himself upright against the back of a birch tree, turn slowly, surveyed the flower field clearly with those ancient dark eyes, and then, without hesitation, with all the reckless confidence of someone who has no concept of failure, launched himself forward. 3 steps, 4, then the ground rose up and met him. He lay face down in the white flowers for a moment. Seraphine did not rush to him. She waited, and after a breath, he lifted his head, looked at her, and laughed. Not cried, laughed, as though falling was the funniest thing that had ever happened. She nudged him upright with her nose. He grabbed her fur, and they continued. The pack accepted him the way the pack accepts all things Seraphine brings to them. Completely and without question, they were curious. These great white creatures who could bring down an egg without breaking stride were absolutely fascinated by this small, warm thing that smelled of light and old forest, and something none of them could name. They circled him. They sniffed him. The youngest wolves, the juveniles who still had the wide-eyed wonder of the net yet jaded, lay down in front of him and watched him with their heads tilted sideways as though he were a puzzle they intended to solve. He reached out and touched nose after nose after nose, and every wolf he touched went still, just for a moment, just long enough for something to pass between them, a recognition, a warmth, as though his touch reminded them of something they had almost forgotten they were. Summer brought speed. The juvenile wolves, the yearlings and the 2-year-olds, those glorious legless creatures who had learned enough to be dangerous and not yet enough to be cautious, adopted him as one of their own with an enthusiasm that Seraphine watched with quiet amusement. They ran. Morning to evening, they ran through the silver-backed trees, along the river bank, up the long ridge and down the other side. The boy kept up with them, more than kept up. His wings, still too small for flight, but catching the air with every stride, gave him a speed that was not entirely natural, not entirely of this world. The juveniles thought this was the greatest thing they had ever seen. They challenged him constantly. He never refused, and he never lost. Kael taught him stillness. This is harder than it sounds. Stillness. Real stillness, the kind that a great predator uses, is not merely the absence of movement. It is the complete withdrawal of intention from the body. It is becoming a part of the landscape so completely that the thing you are watching has no reason to look in your direction. Kael was the greatest practitioner of it the forest had ever produced. He could stand in an open field and become invisible through pure quality of attention. And the boy, pressed against the wolf's warm side in the tall summer grass, his small hand feeling the absolute stillness of that great ancient body, leaned. He learned by feeling it before he could do it, the way all the deepest things are like. Autumn was when he first understood that the forest was speaking. He had always felt it, and low hum beneath everything, as presence that lived in the roots and the rivers and the spaces between the trees. But in his seventh autumn, walking alone through the turning leaves, while the park slept in the midday warmth, he pressed his palm flat against the back of a silver tree and heard it clearly for the first time, not in words, not in any language that has ever been written down, in feeling, in pure knowing. The tree was ancient. It had stood through 100 storms and 1,000 winters, and it remembered all of them. And when he touched it, when his light met his deepest root memory, he shared every single one. He was 8 years old when he first understood that his hands could do beyond touching. A young wolf, one of the juveniles who had run with him through the summer forest, came back from a hunt limping badly, a deep gash on his foreleg from a territorial confrontation at the valley's edge. The pack gathered around him. Serafine examined the wound with calm efficiency. The injured wolf lay still, blending it with the stoic dignity wolves bring to pain, and the boy pushed through the circle and knelt beside his friend, placed both palms on the wounded leg, without thinking, without deciding, simply because it was the only thing that felt right to do. The light came immediately, warm, white, absolute. The wolf went still beneath his hands, not rigid, still, the way a body goes still when pain is being taken from it. And when the boy lifted his hands, the wound was closed. The first time he felt the village was an autumn evening in his 9th year. He had wandered to the boundary oak, the way he sometimes did when something pulled at him that he couldn't name. He pressed his palms to the back and through the roots, through the deep underground network that connected the old forest to the old river to the old soil beneath the village fields. He felt them, human heartbeats, human fear, human hunger, and grief and longing and the particular heaviness that settles over a place when something essential has gone wrong and no one can quite say what it is. He stood at that tree for a very long time. When he finally opened his eyes, Serafine was behind him. He turned and looked at her. "They are suffering," he said. It was the first time he had spoken of the village aloud. "Something is broken over there." Serafine held his gaze. She didn't tell him he was wrong. The first time the lights came for him, he was 6. It was the deepest night of the deepest winter, the kind of cold that has weight to it, that pressed on the chest like a hand. The pack was sleeping. He had slipped away from the warmth of the den and sat alone in the clearing and, without entirely meaning to, began to make the sound that lived inside his chest. It was not a howl. It was not a song. It was both and neither and something older than either. It rose from him like smoke from a fire, and the lights answered. The whole northern sky blazed green and golden and violet, rolling and dancing, reaching downward towards him as though the sky itself had been waiting for this sound for a very long time. The pack woke. One by one, they came out of the den and sat around him in a circle, and without any signal, any agreement, they lifted their voices and joined him. The forest rang with it, the mountains rang with it, and somewhere in the sleeping village, 3 miles away, every person dreaming that night dreamed of light. On the last night of his 10th winter, Kael came to him alone. No pack, no Serafine, just the old wolf and the boy, in the deep dark of the forest, face to face in the snow, and Kael told him not in words, in the language that lives beneath world, in images and feelings passed through the golden eyes of the oldest wolf in the pack, directly into the dark eyes of the boy who was not entirely a boy. He told him about the prophecy, about the 1,000 years of carrying it in their whole, about the covenant between the wolves and the world, about what was breaking on the other side of the mere and why it was breaking and what, who, was the only thing that could mend it. The boy sat very still through all of it. When it was done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "Not afraid," the voices of someone receiving information they already knew. "I always knew I wasn't only from here." Kael held his gaze and slowly, just once, he bowed his great scared head. His wings grew with him through each season, each year, each winter's cold and summer's heat. They grew. By his 11th winter they were enormous. each one as long as he was tall, the feathers dense and layered and glowing faintly silver at the edges in any light. He would stand at the high bridge above the park on windy days and spread them fully and feel the air move through them and feel what the air was offering. He wasn't ready to fly, not yet, but he was close enough to feel it. That particular trembling readiness at the edge of something new. He stood at the ridge's edge one grey winter afternoon and spread his wings into the wind and felt himself lift, just lightly, just for a moment, just enough to know that when the time came, it would not be falling. It would be exactly the opposite of falling. It was the last night of his 11th winter, when they sat at the mere and looked across at the village lights and understood fully, completely, without remainder, what he was for, not what he was. He had always known what he was, but what he was for. The covenant was fraying. He could feel it in the roots when he touched the trees. The word of the wolves and the word of the humans pulling further apart with each season, each fear, each door locked against the sound of holding. Each tree cut at the forest edge, and he, this child who had been born of both and belonged to both, and had been raised in the wild to love both, was the only thing that could walk between them without losing either. He sat at the water's edge for a very long time. Then he heard Serafine come up behind him and felt her warm presence at his back. He didn't turn around. It's nearly time, isn't it? He said quietly. She pressed her great head against his shoulder, and that was an answer enough. 3 more seasons passed. He grew taller, his wings grew stronger, the park grew older around him. Kael moving slower now, his golden eyes as sharp as ever, but his great body carrying more winters than it had before. Seraphine's muzzle going silver white. The juveniles who had run with him through the summer forest now grown and hunting and teaching their own pumps. The forest turning and turning through its season as forests do, indifferent to time because they are made of it. And the boy, who was not entirely a boy, prepared himself in the way that sacred things prepare, not with armor or weapons or plans, but with stillness, with knowing, with the absolute rootedness of someone who has spent their whole life learning exactly what they are and has finally, completely, without a single remaining doubt, accepted it. In part 4, he returns, not as the child the village cast out, as what the wolves always knew he was, as what his mother always knew was coming.